What's up, guys? Welcome back. Glad you're here. On today's episode, we have the ultimate episode. That's right. I've been waiting 6 months to say this. That's right. We're going to be looking at the new Jerry's Nuggets. That's right, by Expert Playing Cards. So, buckle on your seatbelt. Oh, we're going there. Let's go. The Jerry's Nuggets playing cards are a reprint of the original 1970s deck that is iconic even to this day. This deck was on Kickstarter and it launched on July 1st of 2019. This raised an astounding $477,229 of an original $15,000 goal after 4,094 people came together. Founded in 1964 by Jerry Lodge and Jerry Stamis, Jerry's Nugget Casino stands to this day as a significant piece of Las Vegas history. In 1970, the casino printed a special deck of cards and sold them in their gift shop for only 50 cents. Almost 40-some years later, these decks fetch upwards from $200 to even $600 per deck on the second-hand market. The Jerry's Nugget playing cards were supposedly printed in 1970s for the gaming tables, but never made it to them. They were immediately sold in the gift store thereafter. The classic Jerry's Nugget playing cards were made from the top-of-the-line United States Playing Card Company cardstock that's not even available today, which makes the cards much thinner than today's playing cards. The playing card company also used a chemical finish then, which is not available either due to environmental issues and reasons. The Jerry's Nugget playing cards were printed in Cincinnati, Ohio. Then they were driven to North Las Vegas Casino via trucks where they sat in storage for many years. The highly prized playing cards eventually sold out in the summer of '99. And in 2000, Dominique Duvivier, the famous French magician and private card collector, purchased the remaining stock of 40,000 decks at $1 a piece. Famous people like Di Vernon, Larry Jennings, Ed Marlowe, Lee Asher, Dan and Dave Buck, Wayne Hoochin, and many more notable sleight of hand artists have been seen playing with these iconic decks. These playing cards are stiff, hold their form, and easily manipulated. And up until now, these were not and weren't supposed to be available to the public. Bill Kalush and Expert Playing Cards were able to attain the actual license to reprint these decks after 50 plus years, and boy, what a sight and what an excitement. That's right, they decided to print many decks, including a King's Wild deck, both modern and vintage decks, which we're going over today, as well as a coral, teal version, custom brick boxes, uncuts, gaff decks, and more. The tuck boxes on both the vintage and modern decks are almost identical. We'll go over a few different subtle differences between the two. The main focal point on these decks on the front and back sides is going to be the iconic Jerry's Nugget oil derricks there, on making it a two-way image. One of the notable changes on these between the modern and vintage is on the bottom where the ad copy is. Expert Playing Cards wanted to mark these decks accordingly, so there was no kind of confusion between this version and the original OGs. They didn't want people putting these decks up on eBay claiming that they are the originals, so they wanted to mark these accordingly, and that's exactly what they did. For the moderns, it states that they are the modern first editions, and also the same for the vintage. The left and right sides of the tuck box itself says Jerry's Nugget in that iconic text font. The top of the tuck box says North Las Vegas, Nevada. Both decks feature the iconic red pull string to open up that cellophane. And the other noticeable difference you're going to see here is the tuck seals. Even though both of the tuck seals match the original versions from the 70s with that off-center seal, they're going to say something different within that tack stamp seal. One on the other side, where the vintage is going to say the Expert Playing Card Company, because like I said earlier, these are printed in China by their plant, and the one that's printed by the United States Playing Card Company for the modern version is going to say the U.S. Playing Card Company. Another one of the differences that they did was they took it a step further on the vintage field decks, because like I said, they were trying to get as close as humanly possible than anybody has ever been able to get before, by not only putting that Jerry's Nugget finish, but trying to match up everything as far as the colorways, even the color of the tuck seal itself. And well, you see it here. That's right, that enlarged iconic flap. That's right, the iconic flap that you see here was used on a lot of the older style decks, not only the Jerry's. You see this on a lot of decks from the 70s, 80s, and so forth. The modern field decks are printed by the United States Playing Card Company on their crushed premium B stock. They do have a traditional cut and an air cushion emboss. The vintage field decks, on the other hand, are printed by the Expert Playing Card Company by the same Republic of China printing presses that brought you the David Blaine Stoics and the Superior Crossbones and Skull decks. And they use the famous JN finish, or also known as the Jerry's Nugget finish. The back design on both decks are exactly the same, and these are also going to match the exact same colorway as the originals that we've seen from the old days. Expert brought out a special tool and device that allows them to match the colors off of the originals and put it to these. You're going to see that medium-sized poker border there. That's going to look great in Fans and Flourishes and more, and those iconic oil derricks as well. Alright, so as far as extra cards, you're going to get different cards in each of these different decks as far as the modern and vintage field decks are concerned. With the modern deck that we're looking at now, you're going to get this first card, which is kind of a colorless card. If you really look at it, it's going to have the same oil derricks, but you're going to have that all white background, and the other side of the card is just blank. So I'm sure you guys can figure out some cool things as far as, ink disappearing effects and more for this card. The next card you're going to receive is going to be a red Joker. Now, this is going to come into play in a moment when we look at the actual Jokers here coming up. But like I said, this is the actual Jokers. The last two cards, like I just said, are going to be the iconic Jokers from the Jerry's Nugget deck. Now, there's a couple slight and subtle changes to this. More importantly, from the text font where it says Joker, that's kind of slightly changed from the originals from the 70s. But other than that, these are still the same Jokers that we know and love. And as far as the vintage field deck, you're not going to get any kind of extra cards at all, not a gaff card, not a double backer or nothing. They tried to keep this as bone stock and kind of true to the originals as they possibly could. And this deck only comes with those original and duplicate Jokers. So as far as the pips and indices in this deck, they wanted to stay as true to this deck as humanly possible, like I said once again, and they went with your standard pips and indices. Same thing goes when it comes to the court cards in both of these decks as well. Everything across the board is standard. Your aces in these decks are also your industry standard, and of course, the very famous Ace of Spades in both of these decks as well. The only difference that's in these decks is, if you pay attention, the original aces were serialized as well. And if you look down at the bottom underneath where it says litho it's going to have a little Z serial number. One's going to say 1019MF for modern feel, and the other one is going to have a VF for vintage feel. That's all I can say about these decks. Please join me now for my final thoughts. Alright, so my final thoughts on my unicorn, my dream deck. I give it a 5 out of 5. But I give the service a 1 out of 5. A lot of things happen behind the scenes with shipping, cutting corners. For instance, my $240 in Jerry's Nuggets was shipped in a strawberry cheesecake box. Yeah, that happened. Why? $500,000 almost you raised, 4,000 backers. Why are you cutting corners? You're penny pinching. That's why. There's no other excuses. That's it, period. Instead of using one mail carrier or two, they're using 3 or 4 to also cut corners and save money on shipping prices and cost, which is also just very unacceptable. And not only that, the biggest one of all is they're not even updating people. You know, they're trying to appease the masses. So what they're doing is they're hearing people bitch and complain about not getting their tracking number. So what Murphy's is doing, which is very smart, but it's also still not doing anything, it's almost creating more of a panic, is they're going down the list and getting 20 tracking numbers and attaching them to orders, so that way it looks like the order was shipped when it really wasn't. It's still waiting, but they're attaching a tracking number onto it, just so that way people get that message or that email and saying, hey, your order has shipped. But the problem with that is the order is really not being shipped for another couple days or a week or 2 weeks later. And people are going, hey, it says my order's shipped on blah, blah. It's blah, blah now, and I still haven't heard nothing. It's still saying it's shipped. And that's a problem. And it's not just me. It's not just whoever. My package was lost for 3 days on a truck. Somebody brought it on their spare time because I called and left a message about it because Expert wouldn't help me. That's a problem. Many people reached out to me during my post and saying, I'm in the same boat. F Jerry's Nuggets. I am going through the same thing. I got my tracking 2 weeks ago. It said it shipped. Haven't heard nothing. I messaged Expert 9 times. Nothing. These are things that are going on if you're unaware. And that is unacceptable. And I could keep going, but that's not what this is about. I just kind of wanted to give you guys some background onto why I wanted to kind of break that into halves, as far as the deck is a 5 out of 5, but the service has been a 1. 2 months late on fulfillment, and like I said, benefit of the doubt, don't get me wrong. 4,000 backers, like I said, once again, $500,000 raised. That's great, but they should have known with a Kickstarter of this magnitude, a deck that's 50 years old and was never supposed to be recreated or reprinted again. That is an issue that you cannot afford to have. This should have been the perfect painting. This should have been a Van Gogh in this museum of whatever, and it wasn't. It turned out to just be a simple sketch, a regular Kickstarter. If it was my opinion, I would say they did too much, and they weren't ready for it. They should have just stuck to the red and blue modern and vintage decks with the custom brick boxes, maybe the gaff deck, of course that's a cool little add-on, but to do 2 different color decks, the teal and the coral, impossible bottles, card clips, stickers, what else? They did the Black Friday release of the black and gold foil deck that got shipped out before people's orders were even shipped out. Why? That should have been put to the side until everybody's orders were fulfilled. Just keeping it honest. There was just so many things that kept happening. The ultimate sets. I know people that are still waiting on the ultimate sets when they said 2 weeks ago that they were going to be done and shipped out from New York. Custom acrylic etched carrot cases from Sherman over at Carrot Case Creations. I mean, these are many things that they kept adding, and I get it, right? You're trying to appeal to the masses. You're trying to give the consumer the best bang for their buck. But you can't do that if you're not even ready. So that's all I got to say about that. Like I said, there's just a lot of things that I think could have definitely been done differently. There could have been better communication, more transparency on experts' side, as well as Murphy's. But, you know, it is what it is, I guess. So I do want to give the blessings out to everybody in a hope that you all get your decks here very soon. Just try to be patient. You know, that's all I can say, because it's going to tear you apart. Like I said, I know exactly how it feels, seeing as that I almost was that close to not even getting my cards. So, yeah. But like I said, these cards are still not yet available to the public yet. A lot of places, you know, third-party retailers and whatnot are still doing pre-orders. I'll link a couple below. Some good people like the Cortezes over at SoCal Playing Cards and more, where you guys can go ahead and pre-order these if you didn't get a chance to back the Kickstarter. So, yeah. So, that's all I can say about this deck. If you guys enjoyed this review, you know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you beautiful people on the next one.